We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home.
Nolan was always taught to stay with the group. If you leave with me, you come back with me. So that I don't understand. And with me being a parent, if I was in that situation, I would have told him, you're going to get back on this boat with me because I don't want to have to answer to your parents if something happened to you.
Right.
So you're going to get on the boat. And if you still don't want to get on the boat, someone give me a phone so I can make a phone call to get your parents on the phone so they can tell you to get on the boat. But at no time will I leave someone else's child especially on the island.
There was a phone call at 11:07 at night, and the moment Christine saw the name on the screen, something inside her collapsed before she even answered. It was one of Nolan's friends, and his friends do not call her. Not like that. Not at that hour. She picked up, and what she was told in those first few seconds set off a chain of events that has never stopped unraveling. Her 18-year-old son had not come back from the island. But here is what makes this case different from every other missing person story you have ever heard. By the time that phone reached her hands the following day, the messages were gone. The photos were gone. Every single piece of content from an entire 4th of July at the beach with friends had been wiped clean. And a young woman who had been on that island came forward with her own photographs showing something that directly contradicted what was written in the official report. A video surfaced with audio that sounds like Nolan's own voice saying, "Give me my phone, what are you doing?" And the friends who were with him that day, the last people to see him alive, had all retained their own lawyers before anyone had even finished searching the water. The official explanation was that Nolan chose to stay behind on that island alone. His father's response to that was 4 words. He does not believe it. And the more you hear about what was found, what was deleted, what was documented, and what has never been explained, the harder it becomes to believe it either. Stay with us, because this story is not close to over. If you are new here, this is Crimes Records, and what you are about to hear is one of the most troubling and unresolved cases to come out of Mississippi in recent memory. Stay with us, because this story is not what it first appeared to be, and the questions it leaves behind do not have easy answers. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He was a football player at Southwest Mississippi Community College, a young man in the middle of building something real. His father, Elmore, described him as a silent leader, the kind of person other people followed not because of what he said, but because of how he carried himself. On the field, on the basketball court, in any room he walked into, people gravitated toward Nolan without being able to explain exactly why. His mother, Christine, described someone who was constantly active on Snapchat, always sending her selfies, always checking in with a peace sign or a smile just to let her know he was okay. His hand was practically attached to his phone, she said. That detail matters more than it might seem right now. It will matter a great deal later. The 4th of July weekend of 2024 was supposed to be a simple one. Nolan and a group of friends had plans to take a boat out to Horn Island, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, roughly 12 miles offshore from Ocean Springs. It is uninhabited land, accessible only by water, and on a major holiday weekend the surrounding waters would have been crowded with other boaters, other families, other groups of young people doing exactly the same thing. There was nothing unusual about this trip. This same group had made this exact excursion before without any incident whatsoever. Christine was not, expecting a specific return time because Nolan had not given her one, and she had not asked for one. There was no reason to. Elmore had framed it in his mind as Nolan's last hurrah before the demands of a new season closed back in around him. Football, academics, the full weight of being a student athlete, all of that would resume soon enough. But first, a day on the water, with friends. One ordinary day before everything ramped back up. What makes that framing ache now is a detail that speaks directly to the kind of future Nolan was building. He had a Division I tryout scheduled for that Monday, the day immediately following the holiday weekend. A Division I opportunity does not fall into a community college athlete's lap. It is earned through years of work, through film, through performance, through someone in a coaching staff deciding that this particular young man was worth a closer look. Nolan had earned that look, and he had every reason in the world to be back on the mainland, rested and ready, before that Monday arrived. His father understood this. His mother understood this. The people who knew Nolan understood this. And that understanding is precisely why what came next has never made sense to the people who loved him most. The morning of July 4th, the boys stayed together the night before at a home and launched the boat that morning. By all accounts, the mood was good. The trip was familiar territory. The weather was the kind of Mississippi summer that draws people to the water in the first place. There is no documented account of any tension or conflict during the outbound journey. Nothing that suggested the day was going to end in anything other than sunburn and a long ride back to the dock. Christine went about her day without worry, and Elmore gave his son the space a father gives a young man who has earned a little room to breathe. He was due back at school soon. He had things ahead of him. But today was his. That is not what happened. At 11:07 in the evening, Christine's phone rang. The caller was Warren, one of the boys on the boat. The moment she saw the name, something in her dropped. She has described it that way. A physical sensation before a single word was spoken. His friends simply do not call her. Not like that. Not at that hour. Not out of nowhere on a holiday night. She answered. And what she was told in the moments that followed was the beginning of a story she has never been able to accept. According to the account relayed to her, Nolan had decided on his own to stay behind on the island. He had met a girl there. Her name, she was told, was Katie. He wanted to stay with her and planned to catch a ride back to the mainland with a different group of people later. That was the explanation. That was what she was given in the first moments after learning her son had not come home. And Christine's answer to that explanation was immediate, visceral, and absolute. No. She did not believe it then, and she has not believed it since. Before we go further into what Christine and Elmore said publicly about why they reject this account, it is worth sitting with the most jarring detail embedded in that very first explanation. In the same initial conversation where Christine was told Nolan had stayed behind to be with a girl named Katie, she was also told that Katie herself was missing, and that nobody in the group actually knew who this person was. The story being used to explain why Nolan chose to stay on the island rested entirely on a specific person. And in the first version of events offered to his own mother, that same person was simultaneously described as unaccounted for and unknown to everyone present. The anchor of the explanation had no anchor of its own. Christine did not sit still. She immediately reached out to her friend Tashima, whose sons Jalen and Javon had grown up alongside Nolan, playing City League together going back years. She asked Tashima to check directly with the boys. At the same time, the friend group began pulling up Nolan's location through Snapchat, since they all followed each other there. Christine was checking Life 360 on her end, a separate location-sharing app. And between those two sources, something did not align. Nolan's phone was showing up in one location. His car was in a completely different place. Nothing was where it should have been. Nothing matched. And somewhere out in the dark water between Horn Island and the Mississippi coast, Nolan was not coming home. What followed for Christine and Elmore was the particular nightmare of trying to report a missing person and finding no clear path to do so. She contacted the sheriff's department. She was directed to the city of Ocean Springs. She reached the Department of Marine Resources, which took her information and then redirected her back to Ocean Springs Police. At some point, Jackson County stepped in and assumed jurisdiction over the case. By the time that happened, hours had already passed since that first phone call came in at 11:07. Hours in which the earliest and most critical evidence either was or was not being preserved. Hours in which a family was simply trying to identify who they were even supposed to be calling while their son was somewhere they could not reach him. In a missing persons case, particularly one that would later raise serious questions about what happened in the hours before nightfall, those early hours are not recoverable. They are gone. The phone is where this story takes a turn that cannot be explained away easily, and it deserves to be walked through carefully. Nolan's phone did not return with the group. Or more precisely, the phone made it back to the mainland on the boat. Nolan did not. Tashima went to retrieve the phone based on the location data Christine had been tracking. The coordination of actually getting that phone from wherever it was to Christine's hands took time. Phone to Tashima, Tashima to Christine. A separate trip later to retrieve Nolan's car from the house where the boys had stayed the night before. By the time Christine and her sister actually held the phone and went through it, a significant window of time had passed since the boys had called her at 11:07. But they were still within a 24-hour threshold that matters specifically for Snapchat content. Anything saved or stored on the app within that window should, under normal circumstances, still have been there. They found nothing. No saved photos. No saved videos. No Snapchat content from an entire 4th of July at the beach. Not a single image from a day that, if the official account is accurate, Nolan spent voluntarily and happily on a holiday island with people around him. Christine's sister checked his secondary Snapchat account as well, also completely empty. Christine has described her son's relationship with his phone as something close to a permanent attachment. He documented everything. He sent her check-ins constantly. The idea that he spent a full holiday day at the beach with a group of friends and not a single piece of that day was preserved anywhere on the device that supposedly never left his side strains credulity in a way Christine and Elmore have refused to set aside. To his own mother, an empty phone like that does not read as unusual. It reads as deliberate. Attorney Ben Crump, who is now representing the family, has stated directly that the family believes both Snapchat messages and standard text messages were deleted from Nolan's phone before it was ever returned to them. That is not a minor claim. If accurate, it means the phone was in someone's possession during a gap of hours between when Nolan went missing and when the phone reached Christine, and during that window its contents were removed. Legal analysts who have weighed in on this case have noted that this gap is precisely the kind of interval in which evidence gets lost or altered, and that the delayed handoff of the phone represents a serious evidentiary concern, regardless of what the deleted content might ultimately show. One analyst made a point that deserves emphasis. He said he has personally helped prove a murder case built entirely on deleted text messages recovered through forensic examination. Deleting something from a phone does not make it gone in most cases. It hides it at various levels within the device that a proper forensic process can often still access. Christine has said the family is now working with experts specifically focused on recovering both the deleted Snapchat content and the deleted text messages. There is also a separate avenue worth noting. Text messages, once sent, typically pass through a carrier's network and may be stored beyond the device itself. Even a successfully deleted message on a phone is not necessarily gone from every possible record, which means investigators or Crump's team could potentially request those records directly from the carrier or from Snapchat entirely independent of whatever remains or does not remain on the physical device. Here is where you need to stay with this story, because what comes next is the kind of layered contradiction that makes this case so difficult to simply file away. Crimes Records covers cases like this precisely because the surface explanation and the documented reality do not always match. And this case is a clear example of why that gap matters. If this is your first time here, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what we find as this case continues to develop. There is footage that has circulated widely online, reportedly captured on or near Horn Island on the afternoon of July 4th. Attorney Crump has described what he says is audible in that footage. He says you can hear what appears to be a voice saying something close to, "Give me my phone. What are you doing?" In one interview, when pressed directly on whether that voice had been confirmed as Nolan's, Crump acknowledged some ambiguity in the identification, describing kids arguing without fully committing to the voice attribution in that specific moment. In a separate interview conducted alongside Christine and Elmore, he spoke about the same video with noticeably more certainty, describing the audio as confirmed to be Nolan protesting the fact that his friends had his phone. Whatever the precise confirmation status of the audio turns out to be through forensic analysis, the underlying fact underneath it has not been disputed in any account. There was some kind of argument on that island. It appears to have involved Nolan. It appears to have been connected to his phone. And after that argument, his phone left on the boat. He did not. This is where a second and directly contradictory account enters the picture. Attorney Crump has pointed to a significant inconsistency in what different people involved in this case have said about Nolan's very last conversation on that beach. According to reporting, a young woman Nolan was speaking with near the end of his time on the island has stated that Nolan told her he was heading back to the boat to rejoin his friends. The friends on the boat, however, have reportedly said the opposite, that Nolan told them he was staying behind to be with her. These two accounts cannot both be true. They directly contradict each other on the most important question in the entire case, which is whether Nolan chose to stay behind or was left there. Crump's response to that contradiction was blunt and straightforward. "Which is it?" he asked. "Somebody is not telling the truth." Elmore's public account of this added the weight of a father's years of deliberate instruction. He described raising Nolan with a specific and consistent lesson that he repeated so many times his son probably grew tired of hearing it. Stay with the group. If you leave with the group, you come back with the group. He recalled telling Nolan specifically not to split off from friends chasing a girl. "There are girls everywhere," he would say. "She is not the only one." He told Nolan that one day he would call his father and thank him for drilling that into him. Elmore has said that is exactly why the official explanation does not hold for him. If 3 friends leave and one stays behind, in his understanding of who his son was and what his son had been taught, the other 3 should have made absolutely certain that the one person remaining had everything he needed, including his phone. He put it plainly. It is 3 of them and 1 of him. Maybe there is some pushback, maybe there is some tension in the moment, but you get back to the mainland and either you are still frustrated with each other, or by tomorrow you are back to being friends. Either way, you do not leave someone on an island without their phone. His position on what he believes happened has not wavered. He said he does not believe his son volunteered to stay on that island. He said he simply cannot believe that. And when he returned to this point from a different angle, he added something that lands with particular weight. Nolan had a plan for his life. He had something to get back to Monday morning, a Division I door that was opening. His father said if someone wants to tell him his son chose to abandon all of that on a whim to stay behind alone on an island chasing a girl he had just met, he does not believe it. Not for 1 second. Christine's position matched Elmore's without hesitation. She said if she had been there herself, and Nolan had resisted getting back on the boat, she would have handed him a phone right there on the beach so he could call her and Elmore directly, and they would have told him themselves to get on the boat. She said there is no version of events in which she would have left someone else's child alone on an island, and she does not believe anyone who genuinely cared about her son would have made that choice either. When a journalist asked her directly whether she believed Nolan was left behind rather than choosing to stay, her answer required no elaboration. Yes, that is what she believes. It is not his character, she said, and she means that not as a vague emotional defense, but as a conclusion drawn from 18 years of knowing exactly who her son was. There is one more detail in this case that does not rely on anyone's recollection of a spoken conversation. After Christine posted publicly online asking for information, a young woman who had been on Horn Island that day reached out to her. This woman had photographs she had taken that day. The official report in this case had described Nolan as wearing black shorts. The photographs this young woman sent to Christine showed Nolan wearing blue shorts. Christine says the photos appear to have been taken that same day. Black and blue are not colors a person confuses in a photograph. This is not a case of someone misremembering a stressful evening in the wrong shade. It is a visual, documented, falsifiable inconsistency between a photograph and an official report on a basic and verifiable fact. Small as it might seem in isolation, it is precisely the kind of detail that tends to raise larger questions about how carefully the early information in an investigation was actually gathered. Nolan's body was found days after he went missing, in the water near the same stretch of beach on Horn Island where he was last seen. Jackson County investigators have indicated they suspect drowning, but as of the point at which this script was prepared, a confirmed official cause of death inclusive of full toxicology results had not been released. The state medical examiner performed an autopsy. A separate independent autopsy was also conducted in Washington, D.C. That independent examination was funded in part by civil rights activist and former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who stepped forward specifically to ensure the family had access to findings not solely dependent on the state's own process. Filmmaker Tyler Perry agreed to cover the family's funeral expenses. Reverend Al Sharpton appeared publicly alongside Christine, Elmore, and Ben Crump at a press conference to add his voice to the call for a thorough and transparent investigation. The public and legal support surrounding this case did not materialize in a vacuum. Attorney Crump, who is among the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the country, has been direct about the context in which this case exists. He has referenced Mississippi's own history explicitly, invoking the name of Emmett Till in the context of explaining why this family cannot simply trust the process without demanding public accountability. That reference is not rhetorical flourish. It is the family's articulation of a specific and legitimate fear about whether a case involving a young black man and a group of white friends will be investigated with the same thoroughness and urgency that any family deserves. Christine addressed the racial dimension of public reaction directly and on her own terms. Some of the commentary online focused in ugly ways on the fact that Nolan traveled with friends who were mostly white, questioning why he was in that friend group at all. Her response to that was complete and firm. She and Elmore would never tell any of their children they were not allowed to associate with someone because of the color of that person's skin. Nolan's heart was large enough to be a friend to everyone. The outpouring of love and support the family has received, including from Nolan's own friends, reflects who he was and how they raised him. Anyone with a problem with that, she said, has a problem on their own end. Christine and Elmore's focus has not been on the racial makeup of the friend group. It has been, consistently and exclusively, on what actually happened to their son during those missing hours. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has continued to state publicly that his office has not found evidence of a crime in this case. He has also acknowledged in his own words that people want answers faster than a real investigation can produce them, and that it will take real hard work to reach the truth. Those two statements exist in tension with each other in a way that legal analysts covering this case have not let pass without comment. Multiple analysts have pushed back on the framing of saying publicly and this early in an active investigation that there is no evidence of foul play. Their consistent position has been that an ongoing investigation should be described as exactly that, ongoing, rather than closing off a possibility before basic evidentiary questions have even been formally answered. One analyst made a specific point about what that kind of premature public statement can do. It shapes the public understanding of a case before the facts are fully in, and in a case where the family and their attorney are already arguing that the handling of early evidence raises concerns. Any official statement that suggests the outcome is already clear has significant consequences for how the investigation is perceived going forward. The legal analysts who reviewed the case publicly raised several pointed questions about the investigation's earliest hours that deserve to be walked through clearly, because they speak directly to how evidence either was or was not handled. One analyst focused on evidence preservation in the immediate aftermath. The boys called Christine at 11:07 in the evening. The phone itself did not reach her until sometime the following day. That gap, she said, is precisely when evidence gets lost or altered in any investigation. She raised specific questions that nobody appears to have answered publicly. Did anyone document whether the friends had changed clothes between leaving the island and being interviewed? Were there scratches or any signs of physical altercation visible on anyone's body? Were those questions even asked during the early interviews? Another analyst raised a more pointed legal question. If there is a recorded argument involving Nolan and his phone, and the friends left that island with his phone while he did not return with them, that could arguably constitute theft. And in a case involving a possible drowning with documented questions about what led to it, law enforcement routinely has tools available to move quickly, including the ability to compel phone carriers or applications like Snapchat to hand over data through exigent circumstances or early warrants. He questioned directly why none of that appears to have happened in the first several days of this investigation. The chain of custody concern was raised explicitly and deserves to be stated plainly. If the phone was in the friend group's possession for a number of hours before it reached the family, and anything was deleted from it during that window, that alone could support an argument of evidence tampering regardless of whether the deleted content itself would turn out to be significant. The phone's journey from the island to the friend group to Tashima to Christine is not a documented, supervised chain. It is a series of informal handoffs over an extended period during which the contents appear to have been substantially cleared. Legal analysts have stated that this kind of gap in chain of custody is exactly the sort of detail that tends to matter far more in a courtroom later than it might appear to matter during an active investigation in progress. There was also analysis of the position taken by Judge Ashley Cole, whose son Warren was one of the young men on the boat that day. Judge Cole issued her own public statement relatively early in this case, defending her son and laying out her family's account of the timeline. The legal analyst's read on that statement was direct. She said the judge appeared to be getting ahead of the story, building her own record before harder and more specific questions could be asked publicly. No analyst accused the judge of any specific wrongdoing in making that statement, but the timing of it and the specificity of its framing were noted as something worth examining. A sitting judge issuing a detailed public defense of her own son's account before an investigation has formally concluded is a choice that carries its own set of implications about how this case might proceed through the local legal system. Attorney Crump has also noted that he has not had any direct conversation with the young men who were with Nolan on the island because they have all since retained their own legal representation. That detail is easy to read past quickly, but it is significant. It means that at this stage, everything the family and their legal team know about what happened on that island during Nolan's final hours has come to them secondhand, through statements issued by those individuals' families, through what investigators have chosen to share publicly, through accounts that have filtered through multiple layers before reaching the people most directly impacted. Crump's team, by his own account, is building their understanding of what happened entirely without direct access to the witnesses who were physically present with Nolan that afternoon. Multiple legal analysts have anticipated that regardless of where the criminal investigation ultimately lands, this case will likely move into civil court as a wrongful death or negligence claim. And in that setting, the questions about the phone's chain of custody, the deleted messages, the contradictory accounts of Nolan's final conversation, and the argument captured on video will all be subject to discovery processes with considerably more legal teeth than what has been available in the early weeks of this investigation. One angle that Crump raised, and that deserves to be heard in full, concerns the question of whether the Jackson County Sheriff's Office should even be the agency handling this investigation at this point. He has raised the possibility that the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation should step in and take over entirely, rather than leaving the case in the hands of a local office that is connected, however indirectly, to some of the parties involved. Whether that transition happens, and what it would mean for the evidence already gathered or not gathered in the earliest days, remains an open question. There is something important that Christine said publicly about the online reaction to this case that is worth including not as a footnote, but as a substantive part of understanding what this family has been living through. While they have been trying to find out what happened to their son, while they have been navigating investigators and attorneys and press conferences and phone tracking apps in the middle of the night, portions of the internet have been treating Nolan's death as content, as entertainment, as a venue for racial commentary and speculation that has nothing to do with justice and everything to do with ugliness. Christine described trying to protect her family's peace from that, trying to protect her own ability to function while strangers dissect and distort the story of a young man they never knew. Elmore described a son he spent years preparing for the world, a young man he drilled with lessons specifically because he wanted him ready for exactly the kind of moment where a bad decision or someone else's bad decision could change everything. He prepared his son for that. And still, this is where they are. Neither of them has stated definitively in public what they believe happened on that island in the hours after 3 in the afternoon. What they have said consistently, across every interview, in every public statement, is that the story they were first given does not match the son they raised. Not his character, not his plans, not the specific lessons Elmore spent years making certain he understood. And until someone can explain that gap in a way that actually holds together under scrutiny, they intend to keep asking questions publicly, whether that makes anyone in Jackson County comfortable or not. The results from the independent autopsy commissioned by the family are expected to be compared against the state medical examiner's findings. Toxicology results from the state process could still take time to finalize. The deleted content from Nolan's phone remains a central focus of the family's own investigative efforts. The argument video continues to be a point of significant interest. The two contradictory accounts of Nolan's final conversation on that beach have not been reconciled by any official explanation. The blue shorts are documented in a photograph. The official report says black. And somewhere between all of those unanswered questions is the truth about what happened to an 18-year-old young man who had a Division I tryout on Monday and never made it back from the island on Saturday. Nolan Xavier Wells was someone who made friends without trying, who led without announcing it, who checked in with his mother because that is who he was, who carried his future in front of him like something concrete and within reach. His father raised him to stay with the group because he understood that the moments when everything falls apart often look ordinary right up until they don't. He told his son he would thank him for that one day. That call never came. What remains now is a family who has been given an explanation they cannot accept and a case that keeps producing details that refuse to fit that explanation neatly. A phone that came back empty. A video with an argument in it. 2 accounts of one final conversation that point in opposite directions. A photograph that contradicts an official document. A group of friends who have lawyered up. An investigation that moved quickly to say there was no crime while basic questions were still open. And 2 parents, sitting side by side, who are not asking anyone to convict anyone of anything. They are asking for a real investigation. They are asking for someone to explain in a way that actually holds up why the story they were given does not match the son they knew. They are asking publicly because they say asking privately has not produced straight answers. And they will keep asking until something changes. This is Crimes Records, and we will stay on this story as it develops. As the independent autopsy results come in, as the forensic work on Nolan's phone moves forward, as the investigation continues wherever it leads, we will bring you the documented facts and nothing beyond them. If this case matters to you, if you believe Nolan's family deserves answers and you want to follow every update as this unfolds, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to Crimes Records so you are here when the next piece of this story comes to light. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. His parents are still waiting for the truth, and they have made clear they are not going to stop waiting quietly. Neither are we.